Hello, my name is Helen Cotterill, and you may remember me from lots of television productions over the years. And you're now going to see an interview about my career that lasted well over 60 years, and I hope you learn something about me and that you enjoy the interview.
Well, Helen, it's an absolute pleasure to see you today.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me into your home. What we're going to start with is the 25 quick fire questions,
Okay.
which falls within the Whatever Happened To series. So let's start with question number 1. What is your full name given at birth?
Helen Joy Cotterill.
When is your birthday and the year of your birth?
24th of October 1939.
And as a child, where were you born and raised?
I was born in Wimbledon, but after the V1 bomber had hit our house, I went up with my mother to Lancashire, where I started school. So I say that at the beginning I was also a Lancashire lass, and then I came back to Wimbledon after the war.
If any, how many brothers or sisters did you have growing up?
None.
What is your earliest memory of going to the cinema or the theatre?
Right, my earliest memory is in Lancashire. It was Christmas 1944, and I went to see Red Riding Hood at the Grand Theatre, Blackburn. And I remember being transfixed by the seats and the way they tipped and the feeling of the velvet and the smell of the theatre. As I went in, I've never forgotten what it was like to first enter a theatre. I was hooked.
And growing up, did you have a favourite actor or actress whose work you really admired?
Well, I had a huge crush on an actor called Stewart Granger. I absolutely adored him. All his films, Solomon's Mine, Scaramouche, Young Bess. I think I went to Young Bess, I was about 12, 15 times. And amazingly, eventually, I actually met him several times because his daughter in the 70s became one of my agents. And this was the thing I remember when I was first going to meet him. Lindsay took me to his hotel suite, Duke's Hotel off Mayfair, and he was at a meeting, he hadn't come back. And we sat there and I thought, oh, I'll go and have a wee, get ready for Stuart. Jimmy, as the friends call him. And I went into the bathroom, and of course there was his shaving brush, his toothbrush, all sorts of intimate things. And I remember being absolutely riveted by that.
And do elaborate. Once you met him, how was he?
Well, first of all, he came in a suit and he immediately changed into a sarong, which was slightly unlikely. And it was Wimbledon tennis time. And I remember that we had a meal ordered in the room. But he had his sarong on, and I sat at his feet watching a Borg McEnroe match. And he had his hands on my shoulders. Well, died and gone to heaven. I don't remember the score.
You mentioned that time in the theatre, and that left a lasting impression. But was there an actual event or trigger that first prompted you to seriously consider acting as a profession? And how old were you at the time?
Well, I was very young. I was 6 years old, and I was in a play at my little primary school. And I played the princess, and the Prime Minister was a boy called Malcolm Quick. Hello, Malcolm, if you're still alive. And I remember coming home after we'd done the first rehearsal, where I thought everybody was terrible but me. I was only 6. And I thought, you have to do it loudly, but like real life. And actually, it is sort of that. You speak up and try to be real. But I remember clearly working that out when I was 6. And again, I was hooked.
Even before you began your acting career, or maybe when you were between roles at any point throughout your career, what other non-acting jobs have you ever done?
None.
Great. What was your first ever paid acting performance, i.e. your professional debut? And again, how old were you?
Okay, I was 16, and at the time I had just got into RADA, but, you know, 2 roads diverge in a wood. And I took the job, and this was a revue called For Amusement Only that opened at the Apollo Theatre in London, and I was the ASM and understudy, and it ran for nearly 2 years on Shaftesbury Avenue, and I played many, many of the parts. I knew every single part, and my first ever appearance was for an actor called Hugh Paddock, and we changed the role into the girl from the town and country planning. But I played hundreds of performances, and my parents saw it 35 times. And I thought everything ran for 2 years on Shaftesbury Avenue.
Now, it may well have been that production, but can you remember how old you were, or what production you were working on, when someone first asked you for an autograph?
Well, I'll tell you the one that was bigger that I remember, but you are asked for autographs often whenever you come out of a stage door. So I probably signed autographs when I'd been ASMing that evening. But my first major one, it was rather a good one really. I'd been about a year in a soap called The Newcomers, and I was in Paris, and I was in the Louvre, not the loo, and suddenly a whole class of English schoolgirls rushed towards me. I signed about 25 autographs, and I could see a lot of French people being very disappointed it wasn't Brigitte Bardot.
At any point in your life or your career, have you ever been starstruck when meeting someone famous? And have you ever asked anyone for an autograph?
I've written to Doris Day for an autograph, and I never heard back. So on the whole, no, I haven't. I mean, I can be starstruck at meeting another actor or seeing somebody in the flesh. I always remember suddenly finding I was standing next to Montgomery Clift at the back of the Old Vic, and with these piercing blue eyes. I sort of remember that sort of thing. But I don't think I've ever asked for autographs, although you do get autographs from people sometimes who give you a signed thing at the end of a show. So I will have had autographs.
So on that note, throughout your career, were you ever one for collecting any memorabilia? And what, if anything, do you still have in your possession today?
I have had memorabilia over the years, but I've been tremendously minimalist in my older age. I'm amazed how little that I have, how little footprint I have. But what I do still have upstairs is a little pink teddy bear, little small thing. And I was given about 12 of these bears by a fan. I can see him now, a small, dark man who used to follow me round places when I was very young, and he'd give them to me in 1958 or 9 or 60. And I've got one of those little bears that is a real little mascot.
Great. To perform, what would you choose? Theatre, television, cinema or radio? And what reasons would you give for your answer?
Well, any of them, if it was a nice part, of course. I suppose it's so different. Television, I've done less film, but say television, and television, of course, now is really film. Television in the olden days was completely different. And, of course, I've done live television. One of the newcomers a week was live, which could be quite hairy. But I suppose you choose theatre, because often for people that's where it all began, where your love of it began. But I was very happy doing television as well. It suited me. I enjoyed television. But any of it's fun because the rehearsing of it all, the rehearsing and the learning about things is the wonderful bit, in a way more than the night you do it. It's the discovery as you go along and the rehearsals. And one's had wonderful times in rehearsals. And horrific ones.
Which of your parts, performances or characters would you say people remember you for the most?
Well, you see now, because you can have quite old sitcoms on the telly because of TV Gold and things like that, I do still get people mentioning most Open All Hours and Dinnerladies. I did one Dinnerladies. Oh, and Heartbeat. They mention Heartbeat, but I did one Dinnerladies, and it's almost the thing people mention the most, this one Dinnerladies. But then there was a genius writing it and appearing in it. Not me, Victoria Wood.
So taking more of an introspective view on this question, whether it be for what you did on stage or screen, can you name any of your own individual performance or performances that you personally are the most proudest of or found the most rewarding?
Well, because I began in variety, or after amusement only, I went off on another tack. And so some of my fun memories are singing on a sandbag on the Yemen border, singing to the troops and getting my heels stuck in it as I was exiting to Bye Bye Blackbird, that I had to sing about 14 times before I extracted my heel from the sandbag. I remember those sort of things, playing the spoons at the Astra Cinema Kuala Lumpur. But for the purposes of this interview, I will say something more like Piaf. I think I was quite proud of when I played Piaf, because it took an awful lot of everything I'd ever learnt to do. So probably Piaf of everything.
Now, I'm sure that you attended many auditions throughout your career, but is there one particular part or role that you still remember today that you auditioned for and really wanted but didn't get?
Oh, absolutely, definitely one. Let me think if I'll say the name of the actor. Well, I can, because he's dead, and anyway, he was wonderful. I did many auditions in the beginning of the 70s for a play called Alpha Beta. There was going to be a two-hander with Albert Finney, opening at the Royal Court. And I did the whole play with him several times, and he always felt I was a bit young against him for this role. But it got really to the very last knockings. And then it didn't work, of course, that's why I'm telling the story. And it was done by an actress called Rachel Roberts. So it's fairly unlikely that I would have ever been up against Rachel Roberts, but I was. But I have wonderful memories of just going through that play with Finney, which is, I suppose, slightly sad.
And maybe due to other work commitments or conflicts in your schedule, but was there ever a part that you had to turn down for whatever reason, and again, regretted that decision?
Well, the one I've always wondered about, because I've always wanted to work at the Royal Court. and I never have. I nearly did in a play with Sheila Hancock called Fill the Stage with Happy Hours. We were going to open at the Court, but the play that was on was such a hit, we eventually opened at the Vaudeville, so I didn't open there. But I was offered at the Court by Max Stafford Clark a three-hander for the theatre upstairs. I remember in it was an actor called Tony Haygarth, who's no longer with us. But the whole play, I had no clothes on. And although I would have managed that, I had this thing about my dad coming to see me in a play with no clothes on. And I turned it down. As it happened, I did get another very good job that got to a lot of work, so I wasn't weeping as it was on. But I do regret that I haven't worked at the Royal Court.
Now, I'm sure that there are many, but can you name a co-star or some co-stars that you liked working with the most? And maybe a bit more controversial, those that you had a tougher time with, namely those you didn't really like or were somewhat unsupportive or were quite mean to you.
Well, I've almost never had anybody mean. Maybe one director, but I don't want to say who that was. But my memory of people that would be quite known are often not on the stage. Now, for example, I worked with Dame Sybil Thorndike many years ago in a production of Night Must Fall with her husband, Sir Lewis Casson. It was his last job. And I remember going out to lunch with them and being riveted hearing about the rehearsals of St. Joan and how Shaw was rewriting things and what it was like. Sir Lewis directed it, you know, in I'm not sure of the exact date, 22 or something. Standing in the wings watching Randolph Sutton sing on Mother Kelly's doorstep. Somebody who began his career in 1904, 1902. Lonnie Donegan telling me that Des O'Connor was cutting my applause for one of my numbers. I said, well, I'm not going to tell him, you tell him. He said, I will, and he did. Things like that. I know I should be remembering being on the stage with Barbara Jefford as Portia when I gave my Nerissa, which I do remember, but it's often the offstage. I mean, Max Wall is washed up in This Cottage. Now, to me, that is showbiz. He was here for a party, and we all wondered where he was. And I found him in the kitchen with a tea towel over his shoulder, washing up at the sink. I said, Max, what on earth are you doing? I always remember he said, when you've been bankrupt and you're living in a bedsit in Lewisham, this is heaven. And you see, that's what I love. People off the stage, talking to them then, what they're really like, particularly comics. Comics are fascinating because you hear them talking about politics or religion or whatever. Nothing like the persona you see. I've always found that riveting.
And rather than asking you who your favourite director is or was, I'll ask it in a slightly different way. What does a director need to do to get the best performance out of Helen Cotterill?
Well, I can give an example of what I mean, I think. To not let me get too comfortable. If I think I'm happy doing something and, oh, I've got it, I've got that, and you haven't, of course. And I did a teleplay with Ian McShane once. I was playing his wife, and the director was a wonderful director called Mark Miller. And at the end of the dress run, because you did telly like that in those days, you did a sort of dress run and then went through it, shooting it in the studio. But at the end of the dress run, he said to me, if you do that, you're going to be very disappointed. And I knew exactly what he meant because I'd really enjoyed it and thought I was rather good. Fatal. So not to let me get too comfortable. And another wonderful note, I did a workshop once with with Richard Wilson, the great One Foot in the Grave. And I remember he said, when you go on, don't perform. It's a really good note, because it means, hopefully it means you're not going to try too hard, you're going to try and be real. But I think, yes, directors who kept me up to the mark.
Now this one might get you thinking, Helen. It does not need to be any that you have appeared in, but can you name at least 3 must-see films that you would tell everyone that they should see at least once in their lifetime?
3? I can have 3?
You can have 3.
Okay. Well, certainly I would have It's a Wonderful Life, because I like to see it every Christmas. It's always on somewhere. I always weep. I always am fascinated by the fact, if he hadn't existed, when you see the spinster woman that wasn't ever his wife. I love returning to Don't Look Now, because when I first saw it, I'd never been to Venice, and I remember not believing what Venice was like, but I also loved the film and the fact that it's playing with time. And I realised that my third one, which is a more recent film, called Yesterday, which is a film about the fact that the Beatles lived but never wrote their songs, and a man discovers this and writes the numbers. And there's a scene towards the end when he goes, he's heard a man called John Lennon is living the life of a hermit, and he goes to visit him. And John Lennon opens the door. It's a terribly moving moment. And it turns out that he says, I've had this wonderful life. I've done what I wanted to do. I've lived on my own and done my own thing. And it's so moving, thinking that he was very happy, having never been a Beatle. But I see that the 3 films have in common things to do with time, as if someone hadn't existed, seeing the future, what if. And I am fascinated by time. I think an awful lot about time and back in time, and I have a memory that I know a drowning man apparently sees their life before them. I can sort of sit and do it, and I find it really, really interesting to me, not to anybody else. But I think time, I wonder if we ever will be able to go slightly forward or slightly back. How interesting.
Great. So on that note, another fun question for you. You are hosting an intimate dinner party and you're able to invite 3 guests to come along. In the profession, outside of the profession, alive or dead. Who would you choose to invite and why?
Well, this is one of those questions where you could choose 3 people every day for 30 years and they'll all be different. But I've always longed, I hope somebody's told him by now, I long to be able to tell Van Gogh what happened. So I would invite Van Gogh, who wouldn't be an easy guest. If he's very nervous, I'll let my little pug sit on his knee and he can stroke it. I think he'll be happier then. I would invite Charles Dickens to ask him things and to maybe show him Anna Maxwell Martin and Carey Mulligan doing a scene in Bleak House, perfection. Or Ron Moody doing Pick a Pocket. Let him see what happened in the future. And then because I'll be in the kitchen cooking, I need somebody to really do the conversation well. So I would pick Noel Coward, because he's also painted and he's written, and I think he'd be very, very sweet with Vincent. And he'd love to talk to Charles Dickens. And so in a way, he'd be the questioner. I could sit there listening to what Coward asks them. And also tell Coward how he's lasted awfully well since he died in 1973. There'd be my 3 today. Ask me tomorrow, there'd probably be another 3.
3 great people, and that would be a great evening for sure. Tell us something about you or your career that most people would not already know. Maybe whether you have any passions, hobbies, pastimes.
Well, yes, I did develop something new in my 50s, which is painting. I was never painted. And when my mother died, she left me a tiny little bit of money, and I bought some watercolours and I did a jug of lavender. Now, it was an awfully bad jug of lavender, but people were rather sweet about it and encouraged me. And I have sold many, many, many paintings and have that as another creative thing. I think I'm very lucky because in my old age I'm not really working as an actor, but I have another major creative thing. And the wonderful thing about painting compared to, say, acting, is that I make everything myself. I can go upstairs and, if I work really hard at the end of the day, bring down a picture, and I haven't had to wait for the phone to ring or the agent or the interview or the director. And it's a rather lovely feeling. So I'm very, very lucky, I think, to have that.
So, having enjoyed such a long career, what are your overarching memories of the career that you've had? A, did you have any major regrets? And B, how would you like to be remembered as an actress?
Well, regrets, yes, that I wish I'd worked harder. I had a lot of fun, and that's not always a good thing. I wish I had devoted more time once something was on to getting it better every day. I'm not sure I did that. I rather just enjoyed the run or enjoyed doing the telly. I would work harder. It's like my school report, same thing. And how I want to be remembered as an actor, it's very hard to say that. I think I'd like to be remembered as somebody that was nice to work with.
Great. And are you pleased with the career that you've had when you look back? Were there any significant decisions that you wish you made that you didn't?
Oh, there must be, but you can't really go into those sort of regrets. I was very lucky in my career. I was tremendously lucky with travel. I've been over a great deal of the world and been paid to go, which is always wonderful. When I was very young, I went all over the Middle Far East entertaining the troops that were there then. Malaya, Aden, Persian Gulf, as they all were then. Trucial states, they've all got different names now. And rehearsals, the fun, the camaraderie of the business. A lot of actors say when they're not working, what they miss the most is the camaraderie, the laughs, the rehearsing. Show people are great people. I mean, it's a lovely, lovely life to be in. And it was very kind to me, very good to me. And I don't regret doing it for 1 second.
So bringing us completely full circle to the present day, Helen, finish the sentence. What happened to the open all hours actress Helen Cotterill?
Now that is a question full of melancholy to me. Whatever happened to her? Well, nothing happened to her. She's still here. You're just looking in the wrong place. But I am very blessed in my old age, because I'm about to be 86, so I call that old age. I have a lot of friends. I have no family. A couple of cousins are still alive, but I never married, I never had children. My father was an only child, etc. And I have wonderful friends who I love my friendships. I love to travel. I'm very, very lucky to be able to travel. And I adore cooking. I like quite simple things. I have a great capacity for joy and pleasure, a great capacity. And when I'm on my own, the evening at 6 o'clock, I pour the glass of wine, I light the candle, I cook the meal, the dog has a chew stick. I'm on my 5th and final pug. And that to me is absolute bliss. I'm just very, very blessed. That's what happened to me.
Helen Cotterill, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed it.